We're back talking about defining success for actors, especially in those first few years of your journey. If you missed part 1 of my interview with Alex Collins, check that out here before moving forward. And just to recap, Alex and I are both working actors for 20 plus years, and we have over 120 combined IMDb credits. So we got a lot to talk about when it comes to this industry. Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwall with Get Taped, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife and best friend, Brooke. Before we jump back in, I wanted to make a personal plug for the new sketch comedy variety show that Brooke and I have produced. It's called The Brooke and Matt Show, and you can watch it right here on YouTube. Check out the show notes below after you finish watching part 2 of my interview with Alex.
So let's talk to actors 0 to 3 years in the game. What are a few bullet points that could be the carrot? What are a few metrics of success? I mean, you mentioned getting your first agent.
Yeah.
Somebody else who potentially believes in you, who sees an opportunity, because let's be honest, we have to make money in this industry. So it's an opportunity. That person has something where they can get acting work that will pay them. Someone else believes in that actor now. So now you believe in yourself, hopefully, and that other person or that team believes in you. Yeah. So that's one thing. What else do you think?
I think depending on what is available in your market in terms of training, not every studio will do like showcases, but if there are sort of milestones within maybe it's graduating or being invited to the next level, if it's a tiered system of classes, or a specific teacher that requires an audition to get into their program and to receive that invitation, or if there is a showcase to receive that invitation and to make it to the showcase. And if outside of those sort of very specific, I think, milestones in the training world, if you please train first, but if you start to self-submit and let's say you do like a 48-hour film, like so that you can finally see yourself on screen, and maybe more so than just you running around doing TikTok videos. Nothing against that, but to me, it's still that idea, and it's similar to what you said about the agent. Is someone hired me, even if it was my buddy who said, you'd be perfect to play the villain in this little sketch I'm doing. You want to come out for a day and just play around. And you do that, it's like, well, that person trusted you. And it wasn't just because you were the buddy. You know how many buddies I have not cast in our projects over the years? And it saddens me when I'm like sitting with them, realizing like, oh my gosh, like when we used to do our web series, Becky and Barry, and people like, Michael Cole, sorry, Michael, like we never, in 3 seasons and 36 episodes, we didn't get Michael into the family. And so it's not trivial when you get that invitation. So I think that, right, that first time that someone else trusted you to be in their project, and then hopefully they finish it so that you can actually see it.
Yeah.
I think that's another good milestone, because that really helps the ego. I love the agent answer because that, like you said, that idea of building a team. Someone believes in me from a business standpoint. That they see dollar signs, not in a bad way. They just see that you have work ethic and talent, and I think together we can make money. I think that's a good marker for those early years to feel like, oh yeah, someone believes in me.
Take that one step further, and you've been with that team for a little while and been going out for auditions, and at some point you book one, and at some point one of those is a union job. So now you've got union eligibility.
Yeah,
that's another marker along the journey, right? And depending on where you're located geographically, there's things that go along with that, right? Because now the clock is ticking on, do you become a must join with the next job? If you're in a right to work state, we're both here in Georgia, you can have that eligibility. You can put it in your pocket forever. You're never forced to join. But now that says something. That's meaningful. That someone on a union contract, a qualifying union contract, has believed in you enough to hire you.
Yeah.
And so that's quite a big hoop to jump through, I think.
Yeah. Because I remember, actors will ask that question of casting directors sometimes of, should I put SAG eligible on my resume? And, I think universally, it's hard to say always or never, but most answers are like, no, we don't care. That doesn't mean anything to us, blah, blah, blah. We can tell from your resume. But it does mean something to the actor, like you said, that especially in that year 1, 2, and 3, to say, well, but I've crossed that threshold, and now I can if I need to join. And like you said, if it's right to work state, it's a different conversation. But that becomes a really good milestone, so that if for some reason you had to be in the union, for some reason, you at least knew you had that in your back pocket. And yeah, I like that answer too.
Let's stay with defining success or living in success in one way, but coming at it from a slightly different angle. Everyone has bills to pay, right? And for most people, acting is not going to be the sole driver of paying those bills. So that means you got to have other sources of income. So I think perhaps we can define success. Some people could define success as having the least amount of side hustles or plate spinning jobs that may be soul crushing, right? Maybe you're a cube dweller. Maybe you hate doing that, whatever that is. And there's at some point in your career, in your journey, you decide, I'm circling a date on the calendar. That's my exit strategy from this corporate set of golden handcuffs. It's nice to have salary. It's nice to have health insurance, but this is sucking my soul and I'm getting farther away from my goal. So maybe the success is defined just by circling that date on the calendar and holding yourself accountable and then going through it. Meaning maybe you take a dip in income, but an increase in flexibility.
Yeah.
Or maybe something that I negotiated in my corporate days was, because I made myself a valuable asset as an employee and a team player and I outperformed, well, every year you do an annual review and that comes with sometimes a raise or a promotion. You can sometimes leverage that and go, thanks so much. I really appreciate you seeing the work that I've done here. Why don't you hang on to that salary raise, but let me have unlimited PTO in lieu of that? Because I think some actors, as they're getting into the industry, think, I need to have pure flexibility for all the acting work I'm going to be doing. And then you realize, especially in the self-tape environment, I'm not interrupting my business day with my taped auditions. I could do them at 9 o'clock at home, right, at night. And when I do book a job, it's a one-day booking in a lot of cases. All right, so there's a couple hours for a fitting, but then I'm on set for a day. I don't need 30 days of PTO. I don't need to quit the job and live a purely flexible lifestyle right off of the bat. Wait until those circumstances converge and force you to do that. But I think recognizing it and coming up with a game plan is in and of itself a form of success.
Yeah.
Right?
That brings up potentially a related topic, but I don't know how far we want to go down this rabbit hole is, and if we talk in terms of extremes, on the one extreme is the person with maybe a six-figure corporate income. And on the other hand is the person who never stepped into corporate America, has always been a gig worker and has 7 side hustles. And that's maybe not even an exaggeration, right? If they were to list all the things that pay them money. And it becomes an interesting, I think it's tied to this idea of success in terms of how you can manage your relationship to money. Because on the one hand, the six-figure salary corporate person has a hard time giving up that stability and that amount of zeros.
Yeah.
But if they're very diligent and, I hate that this might be an accurate stereotype, it's probably actually not that accurate because there's probably just as many people with six-figure incomes that have no idea how to manage their money as there are people who are gig workers. But they at least have more resources available to them because of that disposable income to have a 401k or an IRA or both, to maybe even have somebody who's actively managing a fund for them. But if you can, handle your money very well, I think it would be easier to divorce yourself from that corporate job, knowing that you have investments and you have other. I was just talking to someone the other day, and like even investing in property, real estate, becoming a landlord, buying a duplex and subletting it, that sort of thing. That can become ways of freeing up time by having passive income. On the other hand, you have those gig workers who might have really bad relationships with money, thus the 7 jobs, and so it will behoove them to change their relationship to money in a way. And I know, like, you have a course that helps actors with that, and I just think it's one of those overlooked or maybe underserved areas for actors, which is, you can gain back the most precious resource, time, if you were to understand a little bit better how to manage that money resource. And some of it is not that person's fault because of how they were raised and how they were taught about money, both from family, but then at least my public high school, did a poor job. My economics teacher, we literally watched movies. I barely learned anything about economics, but I did see Forrest Gump and a few other really good movies that semester or that year. And so, so there's a lot of like fault that doesn't go on the person in terms of how they are raised. But if you are tired of those 7 jobs, that because they are holding you back from focusing on your career and finding that whatever that definition of success is, I think it is worthwhile to educate yourself and find those resources. Like, oh, maybe nothing needs to change in terms of the gigs right now. I just need to change my relationship to money.
Yeah.
So that I can start to get smarter about it and free up some of those, maybe even like you're saying, release 1 or 2 of those gigs, and it might not even be tied directly to the acting success, but it's instead of it being the additive thing of getting success in your acting career, it's the subtractive thing of just getting rid of what I would just collectively call noise. Because if 6 out of those 7 side hustles suck your soul, that's just not worth the money you're making.
I love that you talked about that. I'm shouting it from the rooftops. Financial literacy in this industry or not in this industry is critical. If you grew up with money or you didn't grow up with money, it doesn't matter. You have a certain amount of money trauma. If you didn't grow up with money, it was always a stressful thing, and ergo, perhaps you didn't talk about it with your parents because it was stressful. If you grew up with money, you probably didn't talk about it with your parents because you didn't need to. Right? In both cases, you end up coming into adulthood with less education about it and less transparency surrounding it because you've never had to exercise that muscle. I have a degree in finance. I worked for 2 different Fortune 500 companies as a financial analyst, managing billions of dollars in assets, and I still ended up $30,000 in credit card debt in Los Angeles. And I was like, wow, I've got to fix this. Because I was in this spiral of multiple side hustles, and I stopped. I got help. I got dug myself out of that hole, and it required me putting acting aside for a little while to get a corporate-based job, because that's the fastest way to fill that debt hole, right, and catch up. And that changed my life, and it brought me. I was never not training during that time, but I wasn't actively trying to audition and hustle, and because that would take me away from the near-term goal, which was getting out of debt. So once I was able to do that, I was able to like resubmit to agents and managers and start that process again. But I think, on a long enough timeline, no matter what age you start as an actor, that thing inside you that recognizes it's something you want to do and you start training, presumably you have decades. Unless you're starting as a 3rd act actor, you've got decades ahead of you. So your biggest enemy financially is time, right? So you've got to fix that, And even my dad taught me something that I never listened to at the time because, you know everything when you're a young adult, was pay yourself first. Pay yourself first, right? Even if it's $10, $25 out of a paycheck. Yeah, but I'm in debt. Doesn't matter. Take a tiny little portion and put that away for you. It establishes a habit and a practice, and that money becomes larger money because of compound interest. And it's really impossible to see compound interest on $10. But over several years, that habit becomes ingrained in you and makes a massive difference,
In this day and age, too, with how you can automate all of your bank accounts. Like we have IRAs, but some years I just wait until tax time. I'm like, oh, crap. And so it's fine. I can still fully fund the IRA if we have that disposable income. But the problem is it hasn't been working for me for that 12 months,
right? Especially
if it was a bull market year,
right?
And I think without getting lost in all of those financial weeds, I think because that I can already see it happening. I keep going back to this word that I sort of have appropriated from Joe Town, but it's the idea of the noise, whether it's the mental noise of your side hustles, your relationship to money, right? All these things that then if you carry that into the audition space, even if it's a self-tape where you get to do infinite number of takes, that affects the product that you're putting out. If the thing that is looming over your head is, I have to make insurance, I have to make rent, I have to this, it certainly bleeds into a live space like a Zoom audition or an in-person audition.
Sure.
But it will end up on your tape, if you haven't found a way to calm that noise. And that also parlays into if you're self-taping at home and the technical setup stresses you out, right? Then it's like you need to develop a way of clearing that space, that headspace, so that when the record button is hit, you have fully transitioned into the art, and the business has been left off to the side. And you know, some actors, and this is all about mindset too, right? You hear us talking about this, and if it makes people's eyes roll into the back of their head, or like overwhelmed with like, I got to think about that now. It's like you could think about it that way, and you could let it overwhelm you, or you know, if you try to replace that anxiety with curiosity of like, oh, you know, where can I learn about this? You know, how can I improve my relationship with this? You know, I think it's just a mental game you play with yourself of trying to remove the anxiety approach to it, and instead approach it with curiosity, so that you know you learn from that and get better at that, and then get better at removing that noise, which ultimately kind of goes back to this sort of topic we're talking about, which is getting closer to your idea of success, because you're removing all the obstacles. Because your idea of it might not be nearly as far as you think. Those goalposts might actually be a lot closer. It's just there's all of these obstacles that some of them are you've manifested, and you just need to take hold of them and remove them. Some of them are very real, but if all of it is just causing noise, then you can't even see that goalpost is actually within reach. You've just allowed everything to cloud your view of that. That's it. It's over. Actually, it's not. We recorded over 2 hours of this interview, and so we'll be dropping new chunks over the next couple weeks. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And drop a comment below about this topic of success and what it means to you where you are in your personal journey as an actor. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set.